Okay, thank you everybody for joining us for this class on getting a deeper meaning about some of the things that we do during the Seder. Thank God we've been also doing short clips. We started Friday, we did one yesterday, we did one Sunday. Feel free to take a look at those. If you want to scroll a little further down, we've had one from previous years, that you could also find. And God willing, tomorrow we'll, during the class, our Wednesday morning class, we will be discussing another aspect of the Haggadah Pesach, overall Pesach. So thank God we're getting a lot of different information regarding the Haggadah and regarding Pesach, which is extremely important to be able to have a more meaningful Seder and to be able to really take out from the Seder what we're supposed to be taking out. So I want to talk about, and these questions are very important, like we spoke about in yesterday's morning minute, Pesach minute, whatever you want to call it, right? Regarding the idea of communication, and that's what we spoke about yesterday. So please, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to speak up. That is always very encouraged. So I want to talk about two ideas today, two things that are integral in the Seder, things that are extremely important, and to try to get a more of a depth behind why we do those things. Number one is the 4 cups of wine. Right? Why do we drink the 4 cups of wine? It's one of the questions in the matter, right? What's this night different than all the other nights? Right? It's just we say chametz and matzah. Why do we lean? Right? Why do we dip things? Why do we eat matzah? How about we have 4 cups of wine? Usually we have just one. Right? We have sometimes, okay, if you make a birchat hamazon on a wine, that's no obligation, right? It is preferable, but we usually have 1 cup. We make kiddush, and that's it, right? Why over here do we have 4 cups of wine? What's the idea behind the number 4? Why not 5? Why not 3? Right? What's the idea behind the number 4, and what's the significance of spreading it out throughout the Seder? There's a whole discussion in halacha. And there's a whole discussion in Jewish law that what happens if someone drinks all 4 cups simultaneously? Does he fulfill his obligation? Right? Let me just get it over with, right? I'll just drink all 4 cups, right? One at a time. Okay, maybe we'll be a little drunk, right? But I guess it depends on how he or she could hold their liquor, right? But if I take it all at one time, or do I have to spread it out throughout the Seder? And if I remember correctly, right, I might be wrong, but if I remember correctly, we hold that you have to spread it out throughout the Seder. You cannot drink all 4 cups simultaneously. The question is, what happens if you have a very big cup and then you split it up and it's still the Seder, right? But you cannot. It has to be split out throughout the Seder. What's so important? And the significance of where we do it. So let's just talk about it very quickly. When do we start? When do we do it? So number 1, the first one is Kiddush, right? That's the first one. Then what do? Then we pour the 2nd cup of wine. We wait until before the Manishtana, according to most opinions. There's different various opinions of customs of how to do it, but according to a lot, I think the majority, right, the custom is to wait till after the halach ma'anya, right, before the Manishtana, right? Then we pour the 2nd cup of wine. Now we leave the 2nd cup of wine on the table to make sure that it's probably going to spill because the table shakes, right? Just like our computer just shook, right? The table shakes or whatever it is, and there's arms and elbows everywhere. But okay, we leave it on the table until all the way to end of Magid, right? We pour it right before Magid, and that's when the Manishtana starts, and all the way to the end of Magid, right? Through the 10 plagues. Yes, there's different customs. We dip our finger when we do the 10 plagues. Maybe we'll talk about that, maybe we don't, but that's something to think about. Why do we do that, right? But we have it all the way till the end of Magid, and then we drink the 2nd cup. Then when's the 3rd cup? The 3rd cup is birchat hamazon, right? We do it after, we pour it before we say the benching, the birchat hamazon, and then after benching, we make a bor pri hagafen. So that's for the after blessing. That's interesting, right? Okay, there is an idea of doing throughout the year on Shabbat or whatever to have a cup, but that's one of the 4 cups of wine. So it's just for the blessing. It's not for the meal, right? It's just for the blessing. Okay, that's a 3rd cup. And then the 4th cup we pour after we finish birchat hamazon, and we drink it at the end of Nirtza, right? The end of right after Shvach HaMascha, when we pour the cup of Eliyahu, right? And we go through the Hallel, right? And after the Hallel, right? After the Hallel, when we finish the whole Hallel and all the, right before, the last stage is Nirtza, right? Right before Nirtza, right? Before we start doing who is one is Hashem and all that stuff. But after we finish all the Psalms that praise God, after Hallel, we drink the fourth cup of wine. Right? So, okay, so there you could say that makes sense. It's for the end of days. We'll talk about that, right? That's a Hallel. Okay. But those are when we have the 4 cups of wine. The question is, again, what's significant about 4? Why do we don't have this on Sukkot. We don't have that we drink 1 cup of wine and we drink another cup of wine. Okay, we don't really have a Seder during Sukkot, right? But, I don't know, you could obligate us to drink, once in the sukkah, sitting down, once in the sukkah, standing up, right? Before the fish or after the fish. I don't know, we could make things up, right? We have plenty of time in the sukkah that we can make it up, right? We don't have in the holiday of Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, we don't have any of that. Why is there on Passover, on Pesach, the mitzvah of drinking 4 cups of wine? Now, that's the first part of what I want to talk about. Any thoughts? On Purim, we have an obligation to drink that is correct, right? But there's not a specific cups. It's drinking, right? Until you don't know the difference between the blessing of Haman and the cursing of Mordechai, right? So you're right. There is a mitzvah of drinking, right? And that's an important reason why, right? But there's no numbers of cups. It's not like, 4 or 5. It just depends how much your body can handle, right? That's a good point. Any other thoughts? Okay, go ahead.
I don't know, to show, different stages of the journey, the redemption, something along that lines, I'm thinking.
Okay, good. So we're gonna explore that concept, right? And putting in different words, we're gonna explore that concept. But let's start from the beginning. It's very interesting. In the Torah, right? In the Torah, when God tells us that He's gonna redeem us, right? God uses 4 different languages of redemption. It's called Arba Leshon Geula, the 4 languages of redemption. When God tells Moshe, right? He tells him, Hitzesi, I will take you out, right? Ga'alti, I'll redeem you, right? Hitzalti, I will save you. Ga'alti, I'll redeem you, right? V'lakachti li la'am, and I'll take you for a nation. Those are the 4 languages of redemption in the beginning of the parsha of Era, right? When God tells Moshe there that He's going to redeem the Jewish people, right? It's called the 4 languages of Geula, the 4 languages of redemption. Hitzesi, Hitzalti, Ga'alti, Lakachti. Hitzesi, I'll take you out. Hitzalti, I will save you, from the word Hatzalah, right? From being saved. Ga'alti is Geula, will be redeemed, right? And Lakachti lilam, and I'll take you for a nation. The commentaries want to know, right? Why did God have to say it in 4 different languages? It says, I'll take you out. I mean, that's enough. We'll be taken out. Or isn't that being redeemed? What's Hitzalti? I'll save you. Right? If I'm being taken out, I'm being saved, right? We're out of persecutions. We're being saved, right? And if we're being saved and we're being saved, right? And we're taken out, so then we're redeemed, right? Okay, the last one, I'll take you for a nation. Okay, that makes sense, right? We need to, God said, now, not only just take you out of, but I'll take you as a nation. But by saying I'll take you for me as a nation, then you have everything else, right? So what are the 4 languages of redemption? What's their purpose? Right? What's the reason why, right, God told Moshe in 4 different ways of saying that He'll redeem it? There's no extra words in the Torah, no extra letter in the Torah. Right? So why did Hashem, right, go ahead and tell us Moshe in 4 different ways of redemption? We'll answer that in a minute, right? But just very quickly, the commentaries say, the Talmud actually tells us that the reason why we have 4 cups of wine, right? The Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud tells us, right? Says that the reason why we have 4 cups of wine, right? Rav Yochanan, Mishim Rav Bina, right? Rav Yochanan said the name of Rav Bina, right? The 4 cups of wine come from because God gave us 4 different languages of redemption. So we have a source, right? The Talmud tells us that 4 cups of wine come from because since God. Why? We'll talk about it in a minute. Because since Hashem, God, decided to redeem us with 4 different languages of redemption, so corresponding with each language of redemption, we have a cup of wine. Right? We have a cup of wine for every language. If God would have done it in 5 languages of redemption, we would have had 5 cups of wine. We would have done it in 3, we would have had 3 cups of wine. Right? But since God did it in 4 languages of redemption, so for each language, we pour a cup of wine. Now, just on a side point, it's important for this, but wine, we know, right, represents freedom, right? Someone that's free is able to raise a glass of wine, right? Wine represents, being joyous, being able to, exercise your ability to show that you are worthy of something, right? That's a sign of royalty, right? That's what wine represents, right? To be able to lift a cup of wine and to experience that that level of freedom, right? That's what wine represents. So therefore, it makes sense. We have a cup of wine for every language of redemption. Why is there 4 languages of redemption? We'll talk about it in a minute, right? But for each layer of redemption, and we're raising a cup of wine. That's what wine represents. Wine represents the concept of being able to raise a glass. Someone that's poor, someone that's enslaved, someone that doesn't have that ability to do that, right? So that's that on a deeper level, right? What is the connection of wine to the redemption? We said, okay, we have 4 cups of wine because of 4 layers of redemption. Why wine? Why not, sweet potato vodka? That's not chametz, right? Or, how about, raise a glass of punch, right? How about beer, right? So the answer is because wine is a sophisticated, right? Wine is beer, right? Nothing wrong with beer. I like a good cup of beer, but beer, anybody could have some beer, right? Right? But wine, always raising a glass is a respectful way and a royalty way of doing things. That's what it represents. So that's why we have wine. We raise a glass of wine for each level of redemption. Now, the question is, what's with the 4 levels of redemption? Right? What is the 4 levels of redemption, right, that we have 4 cups of wine for? That's what we need to analyze. So I want to suggest 2 ideas that are interconnected with each other, right? But there's sort of showing a very interesting dynamic over here of really digging into the idea of the redemption and really understanding, right, how we have to focus on every aspect of it. The commentaries tell us, and I think this is from the Vilna Gaon, right? If I remember correctly, in my notes I didn't have who said it. I apologize. Right? But we find that in the Torah, right? If you read through the Torah, we find that Paro made 4 decrees, 4 major decrees. He made a lot, but 4 major evil decrees. Right? Number 1, right, is slavery. Right? The idea of being slave. The decree that Jewish people had to work, they couldn't get anything. He tricked them into it, but the idea of slavery. That's number 1. Number 2, right? The order to murder of all male, right, progenies by the Hebrew midwives, right? He told the midwives to go ahead and to kill all the boys, right? They could make the girls live, but the boys, kill them. Then, right, after he realized the midwives were not really paying attention to him and found excuses, right? The drowning of all the Hebrew boys in the Nile, right? By the Egyptian thugs, right? By actual drowning them. Then the 4th decree, right? The decree ordering the Jewish people to collect their own straw, right, for use in their bricks production, right? So that's the last one. That was right before, right, the first time Moshe went to visit Pharaoh and tell him to let the Jewish people out. Pharaoh said, "You think you're a smart aleck? You think you know what you're doing? I'm going to make, because of you, I'm going to make life of the Jewish people even harder." And now they have to not only have the quota of making their bricks and putting it in, right, they also have to collect the straw, right, to be able to make the bricks, right, which of course took a lot more time and a great hardship on the Jewish people. So the commentators say there was 4 major decrees that Paro made on the Jewish people. And these 4 decrees correspond to the 4 languages of redemption where God saved us. Number 1, right? It says, "I'll take you out from slavery." Right? That's what happens when you enslave. You be taken out. Right? Hatzalti means to say, "I will be saved." Right? What does it mean? I will be saved, and I will be saved. Literally, Hatzalah means to say, "My life will be saved." So God helped the midwives, right? By defying, they defied Pharaoh. The Jewish people were saved, right? So there was no more killing. Ga'alti means to see, I will be redeemed, right? A redemption. So yes, the boys were thrown into the Nile, right? But the commentators explain that the Midrash tells us that the kids were actually saved, right? God made a miracle and they were saved, right? And they were, God made a miracle that they were able to nurse somehow through, God made it that they were fed, right? And then they were returned back to their parents. And all of a sudden kids knew exactly who their parents were. They walked back. There's a miracle. Right? The Midrash tells us, it's not in the Torah itself. So Geula, right? The redemption means that they returned to their parents. And then the final thing was the extreme hardship, right? Of literally losing their freedom, of not even having a second, right? God said the remedy for that is you're going to become my nation, right? And being my nation, we spoke about in the lunch and learn, right? Last week, we have freedom to choose, right? It's our choice to choose. Right? You're my nation now. We have the freedom to choose. There's consequences if you choose wrong, but there's freedom to choose. And therefore, the four languages of redemption correspond to the four different extreme decrees, right, that Paro, right, decreed against the Jewish people, right? And that then goes ahead and correlates with the four parts of the Seder, right? And we'll see in a minute, it correlates with another component, which is different, right, but has a connection to the Seder too. The four parts of the Seder. What are the four parts of the Seder? So yes, there's 15 steps to the Seder. And we spoke about this in previous years in classes. I think I did a short clip on this. Right? There's 15 parts of the Seder. And the 15 parts of the Seder, right? Each one, Magid, Rachza, Motzi, Matzah, right? I'm skipping, right? Kaddish, Orchatz, right? Karpas, right? There's 15 parts to the Seder. But the Seder is also divided into four sections, right? The first section is Kaddish, right? Kedusha, right? Kedusha being able to be sanctified, right? The idea of ourselves being Hitzesi, right? We're taken out of this materialistic world, right? The concept of holiness, washing our hands, right? For eating fruits, vegetables. Sorry, that was something they did in the Beit Mikdash, right? We're starting off with that. Hitzesi, God took us out the ability to take ourselves out of this impurity, right? The next part is Magid, right? Hitzalti. Right, we're talking about all that God saved us. Right, we talk about the 10 plagues. We talk about Dayenu, each one. Why is it Dayenu? Why would it have been enough? Right, we'll talk about that. Either tomorrow or in another minute. Right, before Pesach. Right, how could that be enough? Right, that can't be enough. Right, but we talk about that. We talk about God saves us. God's constantly saving us. So it's healthy. God's saving us, right? We talk about that. That's what the whole Maggid represents. Then there's then Geula, right? Being able to make a birchat hamazon, right? Being able to thank God for the food that we just ate, right? The birchat hamazon is the ultimate Geula, the ultimate redemption, a spiritual redemption, right? We've reached now a stage where we recognize and realize that everything that we have is from God, right? And therefore, yes, that's what the Birchat Hamazon represents, right? Birchat Hamazon is the only biblical obligation to make a blessing. You know that the first three blessings of Birchat Hamazon is the only one. Achalta v'sevata uvarachta. You'll eat, you'll be satisfied, and you'll make a blessing. It's the only blessing that's a biblical obligation. Right? Only one. Some say Birchat Torah also, but that everybody agrees, right? Is the after blessing is Birchat Hamazon, and that because that's a geula, it's a level of recognition that we understand what our true purpose is. And then after that, then we can have a Lakachti L'Olam, taking me for a nation. We sing the Hallel, and we speak about Nirtza. We speak about the end of days, right? The coming of Elijah, the final redemption of the end of days. So these four things also correspond to the four different parts of the Seder, and it's important to recognize that these four parts of the Seder, how we're able to connect to that on each level, right? And recognize what we're talking about during that part of the Seder. See the importance of that part of the Seder connecting to that cup of wine. All right, so That's one idea of the 4 cups of wine and why it's important that they are where they are. And you can't just drink all 4 cups. Okay, let's just thank you, God, for the 4 decrees, and we're done. Right? It doesn't work that way. Right? Again, it's connected to the different things that we read in the Seder. There's another idea that 4 cups of wine, right, symbolize our freedom, right? As we know, as we mentioned. Right? And the 4 languages of redemption is a prophecy. Right? It's a prophecy. Not saying that the other opinion was wrong. There's many different, there's different things that we can learn from the same thing. So the other idea is that it's a prophecy for the 4 exiles that the Jewish people were in. And so the Jewish people were in 4 exiles. The Egyptian exile, that's the first one. And then they were in the Babylonian exile, right? Destruction of the first temple, Babylonian exile. Then they were during the second temple, we were in the Greek exile, right? The story of Hanukkah. Right? The Greeks were in control, even though we were in the land of Israel, we were in exile. The Greeks didn't let us learn Torah, right? They brought idols into the sinks. It's a temple. They destroyed all the oil, right? They wanted us to become Greeks, right? So that was the 3rd exile. Then the final exile that we're still in is the Roman exile, right? The Western exile, right? Commentaries tell us that's from the children of Esav. Right, that's what it represents, the children of Esav, and so we're still in that exile. Right, that was the destruction of the second temple, right, by the Romans, and we're still in that exile. It changed hands of what it's called. Right, it was Rome, then it was that, and it was right. It spread out in different parts of the country, right? But it's called the Roman exile, the Western exile, right, and that we're still in. We're still in that exile. So it says the commentaries that the 4 languages of redemption, right, correspond to a prophecy, right, of that God is telling the Jewish people, right, that I will redeem you 4 times, right, 4 specific times throughout our lives. God is constantly saving us, but 4 specific redemptions, right. Number 1, the exile from Egypt, right, and that's V'hitzesi. I will take you out, literally take you out, make you a nation, take you out of that slavery, right. That's step number 1. The second exile is the Babylonian exile, and that's Itzalti. Is what happened by the Babylonian exile, right? Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people, right? Sherry just mentioned about the holiday of Purim, right? What was the decree during exile of Babylonian, right? Literally, our lives were at stake. We could have tried to convert. We could have tried to, serve all the different Babylonian gods. It wouldn't have made any difference. Haman wanted to literally wipe us out. That's Hitzalti. I will save you. Right? God is promising that I will save you. You will Revech v'hatzala l'chol haYudim. That's the language in the Megillah. Right? There was a hatzala. There was a saving for the Jewish people. The same word that God uses, right, for the second redemption, Hitzalti, and I will save you. The 3rd exile was the Greek exile. As we mentioned, they didn't care about our physical bodies, and they didn't want to kill us. Right? They wanted to destroy us spiritually. They wanted us to become Greeks. Right? They didn't want us to recognize any spirituality. That's geula. That's not a physical saving. That's a spiritual saving. The ga'alti, and I'll spiritually save you. Right? That's the language of geula. And then the last one, the final exile, which we're constantly waiting for and praying, and we say in the Animamin, I believe every day the Mashiach will come, right? Will take us out of the hardships that we're in, both physically and spiritually, right? Emotionally, right? And make us all recognize God, I'll bring you close to me, right? I'll make you my nation. Once we're in the embrace of God, of course, we're always in the embrace of God, but once we're in the embrace of God and everybody sees that we're in the embrace of God, right? I'll put my name on you, right? I'll move apart the Hester Panim, the concealed face of God, and everybody will recognize God. No one will dare to start up with us again. There won't be another exile, right? Because everybody will want to be part of the kingdom of God. And that's I'll take you for nation, and that's a final redemption, right? So the 4 languages of redemption, right, are not for the exodus of Egypt, right? According to this, right? Because you're right, only 1 language is needed. It says that took you out, that's enough. But the 4 languages of redemption is God telling Moshe in the beginning of their nationhood, just to let you know ahead of time, there will be 4 exiles, they will be saved, and in each exile will have a specific kind of saving designated for that exile, and then eventually there will be the final redemption. And the Pesach night that we are commemorating we are reliving, not commemorating, right? Right? We spoke about this, right? You every day we have to look at ourselves as we went out of Mitzrayim. We are reliving the exodus of Egypt. We're reliving us becoming a nation. We are reinforcing within ourselves this prophecy that God promised to the Jewish people, that 3 of them are already fulfilled and waiting for the final one to be fulfilled. And we insert it into the Haggadah because the different parts of the Haggadah represent the different stages of our lives, right? Kedusha, when we became a nation, we were able to sanctify God. The Magid, right? We're able to go ahead against same things, talking about God saving us, right? Which corresponds to the physical saving of the Jewish people in the exile, Babylonian exile, right? And then the ability to bench, which the Greeks did not want us to recognize. We have to thank God for the food. We worked hard for the food. It's our food. And why do we have to thank God for after we eat the food, right? What is a God, right? And then the final one, Shroch HaMascha, we're praying for the final redemption. Therefore, according to this, that's why we also pour an extra cup for Elijah, right? We make an extra cup for Elijah because we're showing that we believe that Elijah, Eliyahu Navi, will come, right? And he is around, right? And that is the special cup that we have for Eliyahu Navi. And that's, again, another idea, right? But also brings us understanding what these 4 cups represent, right? And what's with the 4 languages of redemption. Any questions or comments on this before we move on? Go ahead, Suzanne.
All right, Rabbi, I can wait until the end if the answer to this is long. But given that you mentioned that the 4 cups correspond to, or there's one thought that it corresponds to the prophecy that God will deliver us, the Jewish people, 4 times. And what is the purpose of being in exile? Because God doesn't do anything without a purpose, and it's ordered according to his divine will. So what is the purpose of being in exile?
Excellent question. Excellent question. I'll give you a quick answer. I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I was hoping to talk about in my short clip about why do we talk about suffering, right, on the day of redemption, right? But I'm going to give a quick answer. I'll talk about it anyways, right? The idea of exile is for us to be able to reflect and realize that we're imperfect, right? Because the exile is there to allow the Jewish people to realize that they need to make a change. You know, God was gracious enough to hold out on us and give us, you know, he's merciful and he's patient, right? Erech Apayim, right? God's patience is forever. But eventually, you know, when we keep on not doing the right thing, right? God says, I need to give you a little wake-up call. So exile in general is a concept of a wake-up call. Exiles represent something that we have to reflect on, the type of exile that we're in, right? And even in the exile that we've been in now, some of the hardships have changed and some of the struggles have changed throughout the past 2,000 years. And during the periods that we're in, we have to reflect on what are the hardships, what are we supposed to work on to perfect ourselves to be able to be worthy to be taken out of that exile, right? And that's the quick answer of what exiles are all about. Does that help? Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to talk about. It's 12:33. You guys are on here. So do you guys want to continue for another 20 minutes or do you want to stop and we'll talk about this tomorrow, the next point? It's up to you guys. Continue? Okay. So the next
excuse me, I have to leave.
Okay.
But thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Marilyn, it's recorded, so feel free to listen to the recording, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye, Marilyn. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is a very powerful question that one has to reflect on. And we touched upon this a little bit, I think, in the lunch and learn. I don't remember. I think maybe briefly I might have brought it in, right? But the commentaries I'll ask, and I'll just mention one, the Or Chaim Kadosh, the Or Chaim, the holy, right, is that the Avodim Hayinu, right? We sing a very nice song of Avodim Hayinu, the Fire of Mitzrayim, right? It's a nice little tune that we sing, right? We started off, right? But then if you continue and read the words, right, we say some words that are extremely seem to not make any sense. Let's just put it very bluntly, right? We say Ve'ilu lo hotzionu mitzrayim, and if God would not have taken us out of Egypt, right, we would be enslaved, and our children would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt, right? We would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. And the commentators all want to know, really? it's 3,000. If let's say we were saying this, 50 years after the Exodus of Egypt, 100 years after the Exodus of Egypt, okay, right? 400 years after the Exodus, maybe, right? But we're 3,000 years, almost 3,000 years after the Exodus of Egypt, and we could still. And when the Haggadah was written, it was 1,500 years after the Exodus of Egypt, right? 400 years, right, before the temple was created, right? 400 years, just rounding the numbers, 400 years of the first temple, right? Another 400 years of the second temple, plus 70 years of exile, right? We're almost at 1,540 years in the desert, right? We're at like 1,200 years, right? More than that, right? We're almost 1,500 years. So really, the nation, we would still be enslaved. There wouldn't have been another civil war. There wouldn't have been something else, a new monarch, a new thing, right? A reform in the country. I don't know, right? A million things could have happened, right? We could have rebelled, right? A million things could have happened. We'd still be enslaved to Pharaoh, Mitzrayim. Right? What does that mean? Right? It has to make sense. So the Chaim HaKadosh says something very interesting. He says that we have to realize that, and this goes along the lines of what we were talking about a little earlier, right? That there's two parts of the redemption. Right? There's a part of the redemption, the physical redemption. Yes, the physical redemption. But there's another part of the redemption is the redemption of our spiritual soul, right? The ability to be able to sanctify something, the ability to be able to make a kaddish, a kedusha, to be able to make a blessing over food and sanctify it, to be able to take our money and give tzedakah, make it holy, to be able to take our words and make sure that they become spiritual and not spiritual. And whatever it is, we have the ability, right, to go ahead, right, and to sanctify things. How do we have that ability? We have that ability because God gave us the Torah, our forefathers, the Torah on Mount Sinai. If you notice, every time Moshe told Pharaoh to let the Jewish people go, let the Jewish people go, and we spoke about this in the Lunch and Learn, and let the Jewish people go, and I'll take them to the mountain to make a holiday for God. What was that holiday for God? It was to learn, to receive the Torah. And the whole purpose of the Exodus of Egypt was not necessarily to become free physically, but to be able to become spiritually free and have the ability to be able to grow spiritually, right? To receive the Torah. There's suggestions by some commentaries that if Pharaoh would have let Moshe out right away, right? Moshe was not trying to trick Pharaoh. Commentaries ask, Moshe really trying to trick Pharaoh? He said, we'll go for 2 weeks and we'll come back, right? Like what was like, once we get out, then we're going to trick you. We're not coming back. There are some commentaries that say that no, the original plan was to come back. The original plan was to come back. Right? The Jewish people were steeped in impurity. Right? God realized they were too far out. Right? So he needed to give them the Torah, the ability to elevate themselves, and they would have come back, but they would have had the Torah, they would have had the mitzvahs, and then finish off the time there. Because according to some commentaries, right, that's the thing. It was God promised Abraham 400 years, and only there for 210 years. Right? There's different ways of answering the question. Right? But no, the original plan was for them to go back. But God said, I need to give. They're too steeped in the culture of Egypt, and they became so impure. I need to give them the tools to be able to elevate themselves, and that's the Torah. So the original plan was that the whole Exodus for Egypt originally was just to become spiritually growth, the ability to elevate ourselves, right? And then yes, down the line, 400 years, God would have taken them out physically, whatever it is, another 200, not 190 years, or whatever it is. Or even according to another opinion, that's how it calculated the numbers, right? But the freedom that we're talking about is a spiritual freedom. And therefore the answer is, right, when we say that if we would have been stuck, if God wouldn't have taken us out of Egypt, we would still be Meshubat the Paro Mitzrayim, right? Not the actual Paro then in the Mitzrayim. We might have been taken out, but we would still be enslaved to that culture, to the culture of Mitzrayim, not being able to elevate ourselves. Because if God wouldn't have taken us out, might have been taken out by someone else. Another kingdom would have redeemed us. We would have rebelled, right? Whatever. We would have, a million things could happen over time. But we still be, if God did not take us out, we would still been enslaved to that culture, to that lifestyle. We wouldn't have the ability to go ahead and to elevate ourselves, right? And that, right, is what we're celebrating, right? The exit of Egypt. And therefore, right afterwards, it speaks about these great rabbis, right? Learning about the Yetzias Mitzrayim all the time, right? To show that this is the essence of our ability to learn Torah, right? And to explore and to grow, right? And it continues with the other things, the 4 sons, right? Asking questions, analyzing the spirituality component, right? Not just the physical component. And you're right, eventually we probably would have been freed one way or another. But it's a spiritual component. That's what we have to understand. And that when we are celebrating Pesach, right? We're celebrating Pesach, of course, for the physical freedom, but we're celebrating Pesach for the spiritual freedom, right? For the ability to be able to make a Seder night, the ability to be able to make a Kiddush, to be able to daven, to be able to have a relationship with God, to do mitzvot. That's what we're celebrating, right? And that's the essence, one of the main essence of Pesach. So let's analyze these concepts, right, with other things that we're learning, and spending the time to read through different Haggadahs. There's plenty of them, right, with English, all in English explanation, and to truly get a more meaningful Pesach, to realize that the holiday Pesach is a time of our spiritual redemption. We might be in our own rut, wherever that may be, where we've grown a certain amount, but we're in our own rut, right? Taking on, having the guts to take on something new, or a new step, right? Or a new level, right? It's not easy, right? It's a great time during Pesach to reflect on this, right? Like we spoke about Friday, the Jewish people, God had to see the Jewish people take that set, have the strength and the belief in God that He will protect them, right? Taking that next step, we also, let's just this Pesach, take that next step in our spirituality, right? And grow and realize that the status quo is never good. It's always good to grow to the next step. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, sorry for the delay, not having it last night, but I hope you guys enjoy this, and stay tuned to class tomorrow. We'll talk about another aspect, and then a couple more video clips. Take care, everyone.